third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen. Izzo dying for a moving screen.
It's that dreaded moving screen.
Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Moving Screen Podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn of The Athletic here with Dylan Burkhart of UM Hoops. It is Monday, January 4th. And Dylan, your boys are going to the playoffs. How about this?
Oh, the Cleveland Browns, they're not quite my boys. It's
Whatever,
like,
you're in
like
Cleveland?
your neighbors. It's like your neighbors are going to the playoffs.
Okay.
It's big. They tried to mess it up pretty. I mean, I don't follow them that closely, but lost to the Jets. Almost blew a lead to a bunch of backups. It was an interesting little ride. At least they aren't just outright throwing the season away and ruining the integrity of the NFL like your team.
Well, before we get to the Eagles, though, I mean, now you get to be like in a city with like a week of positivity and excitement. That's got to feel good.
Yeah, I don't know if I would go with that as Cleveland's vibe despite making the playoffs, but that's fair. I also feel bad for a pretty passionate fan base that they can't all be there to be at the playoff game, right? That's a tough break for what was it? It was almost a 20-year drought, I think, since they last made the playoffs.
I would assume so. I have no idea any of
I think it's
details.
2002. It's almost as long as Michigan State's NCAA tournament streak.
Mm-hmm. But Kevin Stefanski getting it done.
Yeah.
Pride of St. Joe's Prep.
You can't go too deep in football because I don't really know anything that happens in the NFL. So
The coach.
you're
the
making
coach
me.
of-
I know who
the
Kevin
coach of your-
Stefanski is. I know who Kevin Stefanski is. Yes.
A proud graduate.
Oh,
A year ahead of me, I guess he would have been. We're
That
the same
explains-
age.
that explains why he
It's
was the one
hilarious.
to get there. I mean, similar achievement levels.
Right on par, no doubt. Yeah, that's cool. The Eagles, that was less than inspiring, but here's my theory. Feel free to clap back at this. If Doug Peterson was like legit tanking, I feel like he wouldn't or couldn't have been as overt about it by putting Nate Sudfeld in and going for that fourth down play. Like, I think that was like actually his plan, and it was just such a shitty plan that it looked like tanking.
Sounds like tanking. But again, I didn't watch the
people are
game
not
or
buying
know the details. I just saw people yelling on Twitter and saw the Eagles and saw you getting spicy, so I had to throw it out there.
Oh yeah, I got spicy with the loser New York Giants. Get the hell out of here, complaining about the Eagles tanking when you went 6-10. Win one more game and you're in the playoffs.
Fair enough.
But
They controlled their own destiny.
this is what people are here for, I'm sure.
Our uneducated NFL takes.
Absolutely. But okay, it is now 2021. We hope everyone had a great new year. Before we hop into a bunch of Michigan takes and a bunch of Michigan State takes, just a reminder that if you enjoy this podcast, one thing you might notice about it is there are no ads. And there's no ads because we do this because we like it, first of all, and also because we use this podcast to promote our actual jobs. So if you listen to the pod, but you're not subscribed to UM Hoops and to The Athletic, then you're not doing it right. So this year we would love for everyone who does listen to the pod to make sure you're subscribed to each of our respective sites and reading our work if you can. And if you are able to do so financially, that would be great. So hop on both of our sites, find yourself a subscription that works for you, and make sure you're getting on board with what we're doing. So with that, Dylan, Michigan last night, now 9-0, 10-0, 9-0,
9-0,
4-0 in the Big Ten. That was one of the most impressive performances, certainly the most impressive performance of the year. Probably one of the most impressive performances under Juwan Howard. The 12 made threes were the most in a Big Ten game under Juwan Howard. And yeah, when you make a lot of threes, you look really good. And Michigan's offense has been working out fairly well in terms of the looks it generates, but everything was falling last night, and that's when it goes to another level. And the defense was terrific. Franz Wagner was terrific. And now it gets to the point of okay. This is kind of what I wrote this morning. The way that when you play a game like that, like the imagination can start to go. And these guys are really good, and I think they're very legitimate, regardless of schedule and all that. What was your tempered, or is it a tempered take, or are you all in on the possibilities of this team?
So first off, 12 made threes, most in the Big Ten game? Because they hit 12 against Gonzaga last year and 14 against Houston Baptist. But anyways, my
point is still accurate.
You didn't say Big Ten. I'm just making sure.
I did say Big Ten. I said Big Ten.
That just seemed like a low number to be the high water mark, but
I know.
Kind of
just coming out with corrections already.
All right. So my initial take is that the way Michigan's season has kind of come together is really pretty perfect as far as a manageable kind of on-ramp to the season. Like Michigan's been improving faster than their schedule's been getting more difficult, but I think the schedule has given Michigan an opportunity to improve, right? A month ago, Hunter Dickinson was coming off the bench. Franz Wagner didn't really seem to know what he was supposed to do on offense and when he was supposed to attack, when he was supposed to do this. Now Dickinson looks like the best freshman in the Big Ten by a pretty wide margin, potentially one of the best, 6-7 players in the Big Ten as far as production-wise at this point.
No doubt.
Franz Wagner has kind of figured everything out in a hurry after that long layoff leading up to Christmas. So I think that has really helped Michigan because the way this team was playing when it played against Oakland, if they were playing a tougher team, that could have easily been a loss, right? Like they didn't have it figured out at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that like what we're seeing now is not really the end product either. Like they played really well. They made threes. They did all these different things, but I don't think that you can say, oh, well, that's as good as Michigan can play this year.
Sure.
And that's encouraging when you know the schedule is going to get a lot harder down the stretch. Right. So that's my initial read. It's just like every game we're like, well, okay, this is it. Michigan's not going to be able to deal with X, Y, or Z or whatever. And that's not really what's happening yet. I think it's fair to say Michigan hasn't beat a team that's going to make the NCAA tournament probably. And that's a real critique. But they're playing well enough and winning by enough that I think you can still say they deserve to be in that top 4 or 5 team group in the Big Ten. That is like an actual contender. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, for sure. That's kind of my spot right now is, as we get into the new year and blah, 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 that in terms of my shift of what I think about this team, it's definitely gone from one that I just didn't think was going to be legitimately competing for a Big Ten championship. I think this team can compete for a Big Ten championship at this point. And you're right. I mean, the point on not beating an NCAA tournament team is extremely valid, but when it's the amount of pieces that they have, and yeah, the learning curve that they were afforded was huge. So, I don't care who you played. The way that they played last night, I don't care who you played, because the ball movement. And when you see the possibilities of all those guys hitting shots, and the other thing was just kind of this, it's as much watching teams try to figure out what to do against Michigan. That is, I think, as encouraging as what Michigan is doing, right? Like, did you watch Chris Collins' presser after?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he was just sitting there and was just like, what the fuck were we supposed to do? Right. You know what I mean? Like, it was just kind of one of those, like, they beat us. And I'm really not even going to be mad about what my team did because that team played so well. There's nothing that we could do.
And did you watch Mark Turgeon's press conference?
I did not.
It was the same thing.
Right. So, and Northwestern did beat Indiana, Michigan State, Ohio State, and was within striking distance against Iowa late in the game, right? Like they've played real teams. They've played real games. They've won real games. So, but watching them go from a man-to-man that was throwing hard doubles on Hunter Dickinson and just getting dismantled and being like, well, that has to go immediately. Then switching to a zone, and within 5 or 6 possessions, Michigan got comfortable at the zone. and they started just doing whatever they wanted again. And then and then Northwestern goes into the halftime locker room, and you got to figure, oh my God, they make 9 first half threes. How do we slow down the perimeter attack? And what happens? Hunter Dickinson now comes back and scores 11 points in the first 4 minutes of the second half. So like when you see that, I'm like, I don't care who you're playing. Michigan is going to make teams, it's going to put real teams in very uncomfortable spots. And it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't, pick your poison type situation. And that's what good teams do, right? I don't care who you're playing.
Yeah. Where do you, like, when you think about this Michigan team, it's like Hunter Dickinson, your scouting report has to start with Hunter Dickinson just because of what he can do. But from that point onward, there's no obvious answer of who the next most important player is to focus your defense on. There really isn't, right? It can be Franz Wagner. And if you go and say, okay, we're going to shut down Franz Wagner, well, Isaiah Livers is shooting 40% from 3 and can easily score 20 points in like a matter of minutes, right? So Mike Smith, you say, oh, well, we can cheat off him. He's proven that he's good enough to just score a couple quick buckets and is the best playmaker with the ball. So you have all these guys. It makes it really tough. Michigan hasn't played a team that has been able to slow down Hunter Dickinson one-on-one. And until someone can do that, I'm just not sure how you stop Michigan except hope that they just miss shots, which is possible, right? Like maybe they're not the best shooting team in the country, but they're going to get good looks pretty consistently if teams can't guard Dickinson one-on-one. And Michigan is realizing more and more to just feed him the ball. Like it's pretty, you have to realize how remarkable this, like he's like double his usage in a couple weeks just by playing more and not fouling, and he's just always on the court. I don't know if anyone could have really expected that from him as a true freshman based on everything we said, like a month and a half ago.
No, and we talked about that, a lot in the preseason as what kind of sustained play is he going to be able to have and all that. And, is he going to be able to get up and down the court against, teams that try to play up tempo and blah, blah, blah. But like, look at it this way, right? Michigan's first 3 Big Ten games, Isaiah Livers went 4 for 14 on threes. Eli Brooks went 3 for 12. Franz Wagner went 5 for 16. Sean D. Brown went 1 for 7. Those are your primary 3-point shooters, and they were shooting 26.5%, 13 for 49. And Michigan still went 3-0. Now they were playing, not top tier talent, but they still got wins. Mm-hmm. Any other year, if you take Michigan's top 4 3-point shooters and put them at 26% shooting in a 3-game Big Ten stretch, they're not going 3-0. It's not happening. Hunter Dickinson affords you the luxury of still being able to win if shots are not falling. And the fact that, when you see Franz Wagner get comfortable the way he is playing now, where he's just creating stuff all over the court, you can win without a barrage of 3-pointers. So yeah, to beat, the really good teams on really good nights, you're going to need to make shots. But, Michigan's proving it can win in so many different ways that it's reminiscent of the really good teams that you've seen at Michigan in the last 10, 15 years to me.
It's a completely different type of team that we haven't seen a Michigan team.
I understand that, but like they just, it's not overly reliant on, one guy who has to do, incredible things and blah, blah, blah. Like they have had balanced teams that have they're really good teams that have had multiple guys who can beat you.
Yep.
That's all I'm saying. Yeah,
I got you. So a month ago, probably, I think it was around like the UCF game, maybe the Oakland game. We talked about Hunter Dickinson as, he's like a crutch. Like Michigan needed Hunter Dickinson to win those games. I think now it's pretty obvious that Michigan's offense is built around establishing Hunter Dickinson, and the rest will fall into place. I think I'm really fascinated to see this Minnesota game on Wednesday. Liam Robbins played really well against Ohio State and just dominated. I mean, Ohio State doesn't have a big, but he's the best shot blocker in the league. They can run a bunch of pick and roll. I'm really curious to see how Dickinson holds up against Robbins, right? Because
Robbins is good. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that Dickinson's awkward moments around the basket, as few as they've been, have kind of been when he either doesn't get enough burst or gets a shot blocked or just kind of messes up what should otherwise be an easy finish. And I think Robbins is long enough that maybe he can impact him a little bit, but I also don't know if he's strong enough to really keep him away from his spot. So that'll be really fast. I mean, he's also upperclassman. He's been around. So that's going to be just a real test, I think, that we haven't, because we haven't seen Dickinson against a big man that big at all, really. So that does have to be mentioned.
With Robbins, he's also one of the very few guys who I don't think Dickinson can just bury.
Yeah.
And just move him. Like, Robbins is a big dude, right? He's a legit 7'1". I mean, he's kind of skinny, but he's not some rail thin, Mo Wagner looking guy.
No, and he can play. He can defend. I agree.
Got some both. So, like Minnesota might be one of the few teams that just go into the game with almost no plans of doubling, other than like an occasional dig and stuff like that, right? I would think, especially after watching the tape off that Northwestern game. But few teams have that luxury.
Yeah, I mean, there are teams, though, right? Like Wisconsin will have guys. Kofi Coburn is going to be – you're not moving Kofi Coburn, right? Those are going to be the real tests, I think, for Dickinson. But, again, Michigan plays Illinois once. Michigan plays Wisconsin twice. Michigan's single plays are pretty favorable in the end. So even if – like, Michigan's schedule is not going to correct all the way to where, they're playing the toughest schedule in the Big Ten. So even if it's been a bit light, I do think you have to account for some of that math when you say, this is a legit contender. I mean, right now, Michigan and Illinois are the two Big Ten teams outscoring teams in the conference by 16 points per 100 possessions. Wisconsin's at 11, and Iowa's at 9. So that's kind of the pecking order at the top. And there's a pretty big drop off from that point onward. So I think it all starts with Hunter, but I also think we need to talk about the defensive side of the ball, because that's like you get lost in all the threes, and Michigan scored a bunch of points, but I really think this game was won on the defensive end by Michigan. That starts with putting Franz Wagner on Pete Nance, but it also led to a bunch of transition offense. Michigan had 22 points in transition. Northwestern before the game was allowing 7.3 points per game in transition, which was the best in the Big Ten. Michigan's defense shut them down, and then the early offense, the transition threes, that really opened up the game against a team that had really been pretty good at managing the game.
Right. I mean, Franz is one of those guys that, I look at his defense in the terms of like NCAA tournament scenarios, where like he is a guy who will be able to change NCAA tournament games with how good he is defensively. That if you have an opposing player, right, who you need to kind of say, we're putting this on you, right, to make this guy's life miserable, and you're going to change the game by eliminating this guy. Like Franz Wagner can do that with a lot of elite caliber players, I think. And that's, when you talk about surviving and winning a Sweet 16 game or an Elite 8 game or whatever, like that can come in handy, man. And and that's what he brings. Because what's fascinating about the way that he plays defense is it's not only his wingspan, but it's also like how quick and kind of clever he is with his hands. Like he gets his hands into little spots, and it's even stuff that doesn't show up on the stat sheet, right? It's just the guy who's going up for a layup, who he just gets that late strip and just knocks it out of bounds, as the guy's trying to go up. Like he does that stuff all the time. And a lot of it's stuff you can't teach. And it was interesting hearing Juwan Howard last night just rave about what he does in the film room and his level of preparation in terms of knowing his scout. He's quite a weapon to have. It's really impressive.
Yeah, a week ago on Christmas, Michigan switched Franz onto Teddy Allen at the half because he was going off in that first half, and he did a great job. Teddy Allen's a completely different player than Pete Nance, right? You're talking about basically an off-ball shooting wing who just chucks threes from all over, and then a stretch five who was really kind of the pivot point of Northwestern's whole offense, and he shut down both guys. He can take that. He can be that eliminating factor defensively, but it's for very different players than Eli Brooks, who can also do that, right? So I think the two of them complement each other really well, because you can put Brooks on their best perimeter kind of ball handler, and he can run them through ball screens and do all that. I mean, he held Boo Buie scoreless in 25 minutes. I know he banged his knee, but he still played. I mean, that's a pretty impressive feat for a guy who's capable of going for 20, 30 points in a game. But Franz, it's his disruption, I agree, kind of sets him apart. I mean, he blocked 5 shots last night, and 3 were on jump shots. Like, you rarely see blocked jump shots, and he's always been disruptive defensively. I think he's starting to do it without fouling, which is a big boost, because he's not ending up on the bench kind of gambling for plays. He just has a understanding and a feel for how to play in the Big Ten, like with the level of physicality, using his length, but also understanding what goes, what doesn't go, and how to play through that, right? So, yeah, he was fantastic.
The physicality, I think, is a great point of it, because I thought in some of these early Big Ten games, you're really starting to see the difference of the weight that he put on, the muscle that he put on, where it's not. There were times last year, if I remember correctly, where you could still see him kind of just get run down into the post and maybe just knocked off the ball or kind of pushed around and things like that. And now he's able to body up a little bit. Like, he just has a better foundation. I'm not saying that he's, Hunter Dickinson. He's got a big broad shoulders or whatever, but like, he's got, like, his arms look different. His chest looks different. When he went up and met that dude at the rim, that wasn't just his length. He stayed in front of him and didn't get pushed underneath the basket. Right.
Yeah, I mean, a year ago at Minnesota, I think it was, Michigan basically lost the game because Minnesota just ISO'd Demir. I think it was like their stretch 4, wasn't a particularly good player. He just scored like 4 post-up baskets in a row against Franz, just kind of bullied him to the rim. So that definitely was an issue for him, and it's just not a factor really this year. And he's still, like, he looks quicker, he looks more fluid. He's guarding all sorts of different spots on the floor, and that's just a big part of, I think, like, Michigan's length at every other spot has helped hide Hunter Dickinson in a way. Dickinson obviously has a lot of size to contest at the rim, and he's doing a good job of not fouling. But I think it's just hard for teams to deal with 6'7", 6'9", 6'5" when Sean D. Brown's on the court. Like, you have all of these big wings who can contest shots at the rim, can block shots, rebound. It just makes it tough to get all the way to the basket. And that's what kind of been the secret sauce of Michigan's defense so far this year.
I imagine you liked that decision to put Franz on Pete Nance.
Yeah, it's funny because I wrote in my preview that I didn't really know if you could get away with doing that because of how involved Robbie Beran was in kind of their off-ball stuff, right? Like, when Pete Nance is playmaking from that middle spot, Beran's running off screens and doing all these different things. But what turned out is that Franz just kind of completely took Nance out of the game, right? I mean, he didn't even have those opportunities. And it also, like, I'll be fascinated to see this game play out in the rematch, because it felt like Northwestern's entire game plan was, we're going to just exploit this Pete Nance, Hunter Dickinson mismatch. And then when it wasn't there, they just sort of threw their arms up in the air and didn't really know what to do. I do think there's maybe some things they could have done, but in the end, Robbie Beran is a guy who can hit a couple threes. He's a good shooter, but he didn't trust himself. Chris Collins didn't trust him. He's not going to go and hit 5 threes and beat Michigan, right? So you basically put the pressure on a guy who no one really trusts to take more than a few shots a game to beat you, and it paid off. I think Michigan could get away with it, though, because they did such a good job running guys off the three-point lines, staying connected through off-ball movement. Like, that's really what makes this Northwestern offense so difficult to guard, is that they spread you out and they're moving constantly. But Michigan did a great job. Three-point defense, huge. As far as they held them to 5 of 18 shooting. I think they said in their press conference this week, Eli said they want to hold teams under 6 made threes in a game. that'll do against a team that was one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the league.
And can we talk about Mike Smith?
Yeah.
Low key, and because part of this is like I didn't think he was going to be this good. I didn't think he was going to be this capable of not replicating Xavier Simpson by any means, but being able to I don't know, kind of play with this level of point guardedness. We'll make up a word. I'm really impressed by him, and I think he's just so gradually. You can see him getting more comfortable by the games. I don't think he's going to be an all league right guard or anything like that, but it's his level of importance to this team and what he's been bringing, and allowing Eli Brooks to be what Eli Brooks is supposed to be is huge, and probably goes maybe a little bit underappreciated, because if we look back on the conversations we were having and we're like, if Mike Smith isn't capable, now Eli Brooks is your starting point guard. Right now, everything else slides and everything else changes, and you don't want that. You want Eli Brooks to just be Eli Brooks, because that's pretty good. And credit to him, man. Credit to Mike Smith. If this team goes places, it's that pickup in the offseason is huge.
Yeah, I feel like I was pretty pro Mike Smith in the offseason. I feel like that I don't get much right, but I was on a decent spot with those takes. I actually feel like both transfers are probably pretty close to a best case scenario as far as what you could expect from them. And a big part of that is they're in perfect roles, right?
Yes.
Mike Smith is being asked to do just enough. If you didn't have maybe the other weapons around him, he's not good enough to do what he did at Columbia at Michigan. He is proving that he's very much good enough to be this guy who uses 17% of possessions, can create a couple great passing plays out of ball screens a game, but you're not asking him to do it every single time down the court.
Exactly.
And that's just really perfect for him. I mean, he's like 2 bad turnovers a game from being really the perfect kind of 5th option point guard, really. He has some turnovers that you just can't make. But I think that'll come with time. I also think you're going to turn the ball over more when you feed the post like Michigan tries to do. But
sure.
Now he's hitting shots now, which he started and was a little cold from 3. But again, I love how he figures out when to pick his spots, right? He's not looking to attack all the time, but man, you sleep on a play and he'll just go straight to the basket in transition, and he's too quick to get by you, right? You have to understand, when teams played Columbia, it wasn't who are we going to scout. It was, we're just going to throw everything at Mike Smith and we're going to win the game if we can stop him. So it's a step up in competition, but I assume it's pretty nice to play basketball when you're the 5th name on the scouting report instead of the only name on the scouting report.
Right. He's fifth on this team in scoring.
Yeah. And honestly, he probably shouldn't be 5th on the scouting report because of what he can do with the ball in a way, but he's lived up to, I think, probably a best case scenario. Sean D. Brown. Can we just talk about the fact that Sean D. Brown got technical for hanging on the rim, and the very next play, Juwan Howard dialed up a backdoor lob? That's pretty telling. That says something about how this team's attitude from top to bottom, I would say.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point.
That's
a great point. And look, what I like what Sean D. Brown brings to this team is, take out all the obvious things, right? The fact that he can hit threes, the fact that he, can guard multiple spots, blah, blah, blah. I like that you've got this dude who's a grown man, is stronger than shit, and has a very clear, I think, just kind of edge to him, a certain he's got some badassedness to him, and it shows that changes, and that can change the attitude of a team. He's a guy who others can feed off of. And because look, when you look at what this team would have been coming into this year, right? And we were talking about personalities and leadership and stuff like that. And that was a real conversation, right? Eli Brooks is a been a really quiet guy for 3 years. Isaiah Livers is a quiet guy with a very particular personality. Franz Wagner, right, is a freshman from Germany.
Sophomore,
was going into his sophomore year from Germany. Like they needed some of that, I feel like. And he's probably bringing a layer because we don't get inside the program anymore and we have really no idea, what those dynamics are like. But I have to think that him being who he is really paying major dividends to this group kind of getting a foundation of kind of character.
Yeah, and you look at all of Michigan's newcomers, right? Dickinson, Shawnee Brown, Mike Smith, Terrence Williams. They all have some of that. Like they don't need to be taught that how to fit. Like they haven't all played winning basketball, but they have that. They have a positive mentality, I would say, in a way. I think they all are engaging personalities in their own way, and I think it's impressive that they've been able to fit in so quickly with Eli Brooks, Isaiah Livers, Franz, these guys have been around. They do things a certain way. I think to mesh all, like it's almost better that Michigan's returning players are more of those quiet personalities because I think it's kind of helped. Okay, well, we'll just bring you along for the ride, right? It's not like, I don't know if you can come barking into a locker room when Xavier Simpson's already there, right? So I wonder how that plays out in a way that you bring everyone together. Because, Hunter Dickinson and Shawnee Brown have already picked up their fair share of technicals this year. So they have a certain edge to them in a way that maybe you didn't see. Even Mike Smith has a bit of an edge. He was down there battling with Anthony Gaines in the post, and he can hold his own. He's got he's not tall, but he can battle a little bit in there. And I think
the rebounding is hilarious when he goes up for some boards.
he literally was on a team where he had to do everything. I don't know. In a way, this Michigan team, it feels like almost like a G League team or like a weird, like it's international, like European team, right? Where you have guys coming in from all different spots who just want to play, right? It fits. It's not like you're building it from the top. You kind of just cobbled all the pieces together in a way, but they fit.
I wonder if some people forget almost that, 4 of the 8 in your primary rotation are first year players. It doesn't look that way. Not right now, at least. We talked a lot about Michigan being experienced, but also not experienced together. And with the nature of this season, though, the fact that everyone's on the same page of what the goal is making up for that. Like they've got guys who do want to win games. Like that is really shining. Like the fact that Shawnee Brown's just fully embracing and accepting this 6th man role and kind of being what he is. And, like the Nebraska game, he only played 15 minutes. If Shawnee Brown wanted to make that an issue, he kind of would have had the right to, like this is bullshit. Why am I playing 15 minutes in a game? But he didn't, right? He's doing his part and he's part of something bigger. That's pretty telling. And I think a lot of that probably starts with the man at the top, where very quietly, Juwan Howard is putting together let's keep things in perspective, right? Until they start winning big time games. But Juwan Howard has so beyond proven himself as the head coach and a pretty terrific hire that it shouldn't probably be taken for granted, right?
Yeah, I think you look at how good of offense Michigan runs as one side, right? Like they're just so crisp and they're always.
If I get one more, can Juwan Howard catch X and O's? Like, what do you think of his in-game coaching? I'm going to be like, I don't know. Watch the game. Look at the looks that they're getting. I don't know why this is still a question, but every mailbag I get, every Q&A on The Athletic, I don't understand why that's a question, but it can die.
Yeah, offensively, I think because he's such a good recruiter, people are like, well, he's not a superhero, so he must have some weakness, right? But if you watch what Michigan runs offensively, I think it's very impressive. And I think again, like we talked last year, in the NBA, you coach to what you have. And last year they ran a bunch of ball screen stuff because they had Xavier Simpson. This year he's changed the offense in a lot of notable ways, just to play through the post and draw up all these high lows to get the ball to Hunter Dickinson. And like you might say, well, that's how he's wanted to play all along. But if Hunter Dickinson wasn't on the team, they'd be doing something completely different, right? So I think you add that to obviously his recruiting, which has kind of taken an exponential turn for the better over the last 12 months. And then his, I guess what you'd say, like man management, right? Like he's been able to bring all these personalities together to really meld a team, when in the offseason we were like, is there a leader on this team? How do they all fit? Like guys don't come to play 1 year and just play 15 minutes a game. That doesn't really happen. And if it does, it usually happens where the guy's on he's going to the NBA in December because he's like, well, screw this, right? That takes some sort of presence from your coaching staff, both in the recruiting process, in the entire thing, right? Like day to day, and add in the fact that it's COVID and everything else going on. And I think you have to give him a lot of credit for how he's brought this whole thing together. And I mean, the transfer evaluation to me is really key, because you look across the country and there's so many transfers who were either they're in positions where they're being asked to do too much. They just haven't been as good as people thought. And he really hit 2 for 2 on transfers in a way that has really changed Michigan's season for the better. And that stands out in a really impressive way.
Yeah, I almost feel like what Mike Smith and Sean D. Brown are doing is going to end up creating a unreasonable level of expectations for whatever future transfers they bring in, because this is not how things really work, even close to on average in college basketball when it comes to what transfers do, especially Mike Smith. You know, end of the day, Sean D. Brown was a power conference to power conference transfer. You know, he did prove it in the ACC. Mike Smith going from the Ivy League to the Big Ten is beyond an outlier. In the, forget up transfer. Ivy League to Big Ten is crazy. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Bryce. Well, I was going to say one thing on that. Bryce Aiken was the guy who Michigan wanted before Mike Smith. He's been hurt, but he hasn't been really, like, he was the guy everyone said was the can't miss guard transfer. And obviously Michigan missed on him, but Mike Smith really outperformed anything he's done when he's been on the court. I know he's been battling injury. Seth Towns was the guy who everyone said was going to be the Ivy League transfer. Again, I think the Mike Smith thing works so well because of the role, right? Because you have the right thing to ask him to do, instead of like, oh, just be Seth Towns of Harvard at Ohio State. That's never really going to work. And then health and everything else. So yeah, we can move on. Any other Michigan?
I was going to,
you got something?
Yeah,
else?
I just want to touch on the Minnesota game. Mainly, what you think of talk to me about the Marcus Carr matchup.
So I was kind of down on Marcus Carr in the offseason. I'll admit that I was a little off base. He's playing way better, like just complete decision making wise. And I mean, he's really good. He's the best point guard in the Big Ten. So I don't know if Michigan's really played a guy like that. I think the matchup's obvious. It's Eli Brooks guarding him. And that's kind of best on best, right? That's Michigan's best defender. That's the best point guard in the Big Ten. See what happens. I don't really trust anyone else on Minnesota on offense. They have guys who can make plays, but I think the real key is, can you bottle up Carr? But I mean, he has range. He can shoot from basically anywhere. It's a tough matchup. They also have length, right? Like, they have natural matchups for Franz Wagner and Isaiah Livers and Gotch and Brandon Johnson. Those guys are both they can move on the perimeter. They can slash. They're not going to be overwhelmed by Michigan's length. But I think it has to, the real question is at the center and how the Robbins-Dickinson matchup plays out, in my opinion.
Yeah. And, they're going to take a ton of threes, right? So sometimes when you play Minnesota, you kind of have to hope they miss some. But you also have to keep them off the free throw line. They are getting a outrageous amount of free throw attempts. I think like a quarter of their points. Is that right? Let me look this up. A quarter of their
Robbins
points?
and Carr both get to the line a ton.
Yeah, 24% of their points coming from the free throw line. That's first in the Big Ten. Look at it this way. Minnesota is 12th in the conference in 3-point shooting at 30.1% or 31%. and 12th in the league in 2-point shooting at 45%, and it's still 3-2 in the league. So they win. They can win without playing particularly pretty basketball, I would say.
And you have to look, the Carr is really the only one who you're scared of from 3-point range. Like Brandon Johnson is shooting 42% from 3-point, but he made 8 of 9 threes against Iowa. That means he's 3 of 17 in every other game. So I don't know. Like, you don't really like.
Well, you do have to watch Kalsher coming into this game because he has hit some of late. He hit 3 against Wisconsin. Now he went 3 for 10, but he made 3. Then he went 3 for 6 against Ohio State. So if he's feeling saucy, if he's feeling good, you do have to guard him out there at least, right?
Yeah, he's been broken for like 16 months, but maybe.
Right. But you have to be more worried about Kalsher in terms of who he's checking and what he's going to do defensively.
Yeah, it's an interesting matchup. I think you have to focus. Like Northwestern, you had to run them off the 3-point line because they're so good at making threes. I think you want to maybe be a little more careful in this game and maybe dare Minnesota to beat you with the 3. I know that's not really Michigan's MO. They want to prevent like every 3. But I just don't really trust this team to make a lot of threes unless it's Marcus Carr, right? I think you're better off. I think kind of the Michigan State games last year, where the first game, Cassius Winston basically got everything he wanted because Michigan was really staying home on all the shooters. And the second game in Ann Arbor, Michigan played a lot more aggressively on the actual ball screen, and Michigan State shooters missed their shots, right? I think that's kind of the game plan here, where
I agree.
Make anyone other than Carr beat you and then figure the rest out from there.
Yeah, and you want to make Marcus Carr beat you with his passing. So, you can throw two bodies at him off of ball screens and make him, have to do something. And if he can get the ball to somebody else, then trust that they're not going to be anything remotely the playmaker that Carr is.
Yeah, but Liam Robbins went for 27 and 14 last night against Ohio State. Those are some big numbers. Hunter Dickinson, we don't really know how good he is in the post. Ryan Young got a few buckets defensively, and Ryan Young got a few buckets on him. Dickinson's been great at avoiding fouls, but again, Liam Robbins draws a ton of them. I mean, what happens when Hunter Dickinson gets 2 fouls in a game? We haven't seen that yet this year. There's a lot of risk, I think, going up against another legit center, but it's also one of those where if Hunter Dickinson dominates this matchup, well, you're like, well, shit. What else are we going to ask? You know what I mean?
Right. Okay. You ready to pop over to Michigan State?
Let's do it.
So a win at Nebraska on Saturday night. It was just kind of one of the, it's hard to call anything a must-win game this early in the year, but they needed that, and they needed something positive to happen, and they needed to see some shots go into the basket. And to a degree saw some of that. They still went 7 for 23 on threes, 30%. But for Aaron Henry to have the night that he had and just kind of see positive things happen was a big step forward. To see, Gabe Brown finally had a double figure scoring game. Joshua Langford was really good. But by the story coming off of it, at least that I wrote, was there was some competence at the point guard spot. And now there's more questions now as a result of that in terms of what Rocket Watts' role is. But, AJ Hoggard played point guard and was okay. I think everyone should probably very much stay on the tracks here in terms of what this, what he's going to be. But considering what Michigan State was dealing with, just having someone get them into offense and make good decisions with the ball was a positive step forward. So what are your early impressions of Hoggard?
Yeah, I think he did the job he was asked. I'm just trying to figure out how this comes together. Like if AJ Hoggard playing point guard comes at the expense of Rocket Watts basically playing at all? Like, I mean, Rocket only played 15 minutes.
15 minutes.
So what's the ceiling of AJ Hoggard playing point guard? I think he proved he can get in there. He can run the team. He can make some good decisions. I don't know that he's got like scoring upside or really the playmaking upside. I still think the story of this game is when Aaron Henry plays like Aaron Henry can play in his best games, Michigan State's a different team. And that's really the key for me. And I think whatever you're doing at the point guard is really just kind of missing the point that you need to figure out how to just make this Aaron Henry's team, because I think that to me is the way out in a way. Like, I don't know what the answer is if it's not Aaron Henry being the best player on this team. I think that's pretty clear at this point, and he hasn't always been that this year, and that explains a lot of the struggle. So Hoggard I thought was good. I think you want to see 5 assists to 1 turnover. That's what you want from a guy in his first start at point guard, right? What stood out to you about his performance? He had that big pass late in the game. I thought it was a nice play. Yeah.
For me, it was kind of 2 moments that were kind of late down the stretch when Nebraska was, you needed a bucket. And at one point he was out top alone with like 10 seconds left on the shot clock, played out of a ball screen, drove down the right side of the lane, collapsed the defense, drew the wing in, didn't force a shot, and found an open Gabe Brown in the corner for a 3. And then later he caught the ball, looked off his man, right, got him moving left, drove down the right side of the lane, and it wasn't pretty, but he dropped a little dump pass down to Kithier, or I think it was Kithier, for a big layup. And it was just like, those are just simple, like, to your point, like, I agree, big picture, Aaron Henry needs to be to use the fucking alpha word, which is just ridiculous. It's every press conference is all about alphas. In the big picture, Aaron Henry needs to be the dude. Okay. But in spots like that, if you don't have just a point guard who can make a point guard play, it's going to be really difficult to do anything, especially in this league this year. And that's what they need from AJ Hoggard. And he showed that he could do it, and I like the fact that there was very few forced moments. Mm-hmm. And clearly, Michigan State is tiptoeing into this a little bit, which is very understandable, right? You're not just going to toss him in the deep end of the pool. But to your point, I did find it very interesting that this whole thing has been constructed in part to let Rocket Watts go back to being what Rocket Watts is. And lo and behold, he played like 4 or 6 minutes in the first half. And I would say upwards of half of the minutes that he was on the court, he was at point guard.
Yeah.
Including in the last 4 to 5 minutes of the game.
Yeah. Late in the game, he came in as the point guard. So what does that tell you, right?
What's going on? Okay.
So I was a little confused by that as well. Is it more just it feels a little bit more like a benching than a position change.
Because at one point it was Nebraska at the foul line, and they subbed Watts in for what was going to be an offensive possession.
Well,
like if you're subbing him
better on offense and defense this year.
Well, that's a fair point, but you would think, right, if you're in late game situations and you're subbing in Watts, you're probably subbing him in for a defensive possession, just based on who he is. But that's a very valid point. So yeah, I mean, Watts defensively just getting beat off the bounce is still kind of perplexing. But yeah, I mean, I think much of it was just trust level, right? And it's holy shit, it's a Big Ten game. You got to get your first Big Ten game here, and it's still a freshman point guard. And for all we know, in a huddle with 5 minutes left, AJ Hoggard's eyes could have been the size of his head, or what, who knows? But
the point, though, is that there's not really minutes for Watts at the 2 if he's not going to play the 1, right? If you're going to force feed Lang for 30 minutes a game and you're going to play Foster Loyer some minutes, you're going to play Gabe Brown. I mean, Gabe Brown is a guy I think most people would say has the potential to maybe be an impact offensive player, but he can't get past 15, 16 minutes a game. So where are you going to get Watts minutes if he's not playing point guard? Because it's pretty clear that Josh Langford has the most trust on the roster by far, and is just going to be on the court, even if maybe that's not the highest upside of all the options, right? So Watts as a shooting guard, you're lost in the shuffle there. So
I agree.
Back to square one.
And I don't know. I mean, it's a great question for Izzo. And I think he speaks at 1:00, so I'll be happy to ask him.
And honestly, do you need to play Rocket Watts based on anything he's done this year, right? Like, he hasn't been the defender that he was last year. He's been, I would say, like, shockingly bad based on what he did last year, right? Up to expectations. So why are you trying to force him onto the court? Maybe it's best to put him in a backup kind of role for 3 or 4 games and try to build some of that confidence back up and go at it that way.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about he's 40% on twos and 27% on threes. Like, what's he bringing to the table right now? But at the same time, I think, we would certainly agree that in terms of this team having any kind of ceiling, it has to include a talent like Rocket in one way or another. But yeah, maybe you just need a full reset of, you get to watch some basketball here for a while and kind of figure out what you look like. How does that go would be my question.
He's
a number of ways.
Of 37 from the floor in Big Ten games.
That's not good.
No.
Right. And it'd be one thing if he's just a lockdown, shut down defender, but he's not. So.
Now I want to talk about the defense.
Okay.
It doesn't seem to be getting better, and I think that's a worry. Nebraska scored 1.05 points per possession, which was their 4th best offensive game of the year, and the other ones were against Doane, McNeese State, and North Dakota State. So that's a kind of just the fact that Aaron Henry scored 27 points and somehow this game was still close late. Like, I think it's a little scary that Nebraska was scoring on this Michigan State team who I still think could be good defensively, but I think those are the bigger issues than anything on offense for this team right now. And it hasn't really been getting better. And what is it? 4 or 5 games in a row, Michigan State's allowed at least a point per possession. How many times? They probably did that like 2 or 3 times all last season, I would say, especially to this degree. So I think that's still the blaring alarm sign for me about this team, because until they can get that figured out, they're not going to be like AJ Hoggard's not going to lead the best offense in the conference. You're not just going to be outgunning people like Iowa. You're going to need that defensive consistency. And I think it comes down to just really the lack of really an interior presence for Michigan State right now. For sure.
Nebraska scored 53 against Wisconsin, 69 against Michigan, 54 against Ohio State, and 77 against Michigan State. It's still it's just the bizarro world sometimes. And I agree that there's no obvious fix or fixes anywhere. In a lot of ways, it's still just kind of throwing whatever you hope works out there per game, whether it's let's hope Mady Sissoko can be a great disruptor in there. Well, you're not going in there with a game plan of like Mady Sissoko is going to be a disruptor. You're going in there with we hope Mady Sissoko is a disruptor, right? And there's a lot of those type of scenarios, it seems like, in any given game plan. You're hoping that it works out.
Yeah, what's your read? Do you think is this just a situation where Michigan State this team completely locked down Notre Dame like early in the season in a way that you would sort of say like only a team that can be really good defensively can do. So what's missing, or like how do you fix it? I don't know. Is it just this case of, well, maybe you play a great defensive game against Rutgers and all of a sudden you just have the confidence on that, and then I don't know. It'll be fascinating to just like, can you get it figured out? I don't know.
Yeah, I would like to go back and re-listen to the podcast after the Duke game and hear what our impressions were.
I mean, I was all in on this being a really good defensive team not very long ago. And now it's like on track to be one of the worst Michigan State defensive teams in who knows how long.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, because it doesn't make sense. I mean, because the only guy that if you just watch him play that you'd be like, he's just clearly not a great defender is, Foster Lawyer and, Joey Hauser a little bit, right?
And Watts has been really bad on defense.
And that's just crazy. But, Henry's Henry. Malik Hall's a good defender. Langford in theory is okay, but like he doesn't do
not
anything.
The anchor to a great defense. I think that's really where we're at. And there's no, and that we can't, I feel like we just bag on him every podcast, but that's really like, that's the drop off, right? You go from Xavier Tillman, who made everyone better defensively, and now you just don't have that on the back line. And Michigan State is getting beaten up inside in a way that we're not used to seeing. And I think that's where it all comes from. So I don't know.
I don't disagree. And I'm not sure, what happens. And Bingham's just gone. Bingham's completely out of the rotation. So I guess that conversation is just over. And then, what did Marble play against Nebraska? He barely got on the court, if I remember. He played 1 minute. I don't know what that's about. It's just they're just going with Kithier, I think, because his pants don't fall down sometimes when he's on the court, and he just does all the right things, and he's where he needs to be.
Yeah, I think that's
and it's always just a matter of trust with Izzo, and that's why certain players in certain years have gotten bulk minutes. And it's because it's almost like because he forgets they're out there sometimes because they're just doing their job. And, Tom Izzo likes order.
But doing your job is a huge fucking part of defense, right? Like if you're not in the right spots on defense, that's the problem. So it makes sense to play Langford and Kithier because they're in the right spots. I just don't know that physically either of them is really able to make a defensive impact in a way maybe they once did.
There's a difference between doing your job and making things happen.
Yeah. Michigan State needs all five guys to start doing their job on defense and then worry about making things happen. And I think when some people aren't doing their job on defense, other people are more likely to try to make things happen, right? So I think if you look at Aaron Henry, he could be a great defender, and he is at times, but I think he's stretching a little bit to try to do more or I need to fix the defense, which could lead to some breakdowns where in a great defense, it's all you just keep everything in front of you. You're contained. Everyone makes the rotations and you kind of go about it like that. That's just not this team. And that's scary. And Rutgers is going to be a tough matchup because I think this Rutgers team is going to be a little hungry after a couple frustrating losses. And I can't tell if I should be selling all my Rutgers stock or trying to rebuy low right now. What's your read on this matchup?
I would go with the latter. I still like Rutgers a lot. And I think this might be a bad matchup for Michigan State. The way the physical way that Rutgers plays, where they look to punch you right in the face, and Michigan State, as bizarre as it is, plays with this odd passiveness defensively right now, where if you want to go downhill on them, you can go downhill on them, right? And that's Rutgers. Everyone's watched Rutgers basketball in the last couple of years. It's the same thing. It's just with talent now. So they've got big bodies. They can get into the paint, and Michigan has no real paint presence right now. So I don't like this matchup for Michigan State. Ron Harper is playing like an All-American. And I have thought that Rutgers' 3-point shooting was probably going to cool, and it has. So, obviously if Rutgers goes out and goes 4 for 22 on threes,
They're leading the Big Ten in 3-point shooting.
Yeah, but what do the last couple games look like? What do they look like?
44% in Big Ten games, shot 39% against Iowa, 52% against Purdue, 40% against Ohio State, 40% against
Harper
Illinois.
cool off?
Harper missed a game or two there. He missed a game and then didn't. I mean, he's 3 of 8 and 4 of 10. No, he hasn't cooled off. 50% in the Big Ten. Okay. They just can't make free throws. That's their problem.
Free throws. Well,
60% at the line.
I still think their 3-point shooting is going to cool off. Okay.
So maybe that's a good spot.
And that's the thing. If they've certainly got a 4 for 23 coming some point. Maybe it's this game, and then Michigan State gets a win, and now it's feeling good about itself, right? And suddenly you get the ball rolling that way. But Rutgers is certainly capable of coming into Breslin and getting a win tomorrow night. They need to be dialed in. Aaron Henry needs to keep this thing going, right? You need to see consistency from Aaron Henry as much as anything else. Like if this goes from 27 against Nebraska to another one of, these kind of struggle-filled games where it looks like he's just wholly uncomfortable, that's just like, is this just going to be a yo-yo all year where you don't know what you're going to get? You want to see it, right? You want to see it in back-to-back games, and then after that one, you want to see it in a third straight game. He's supposed to be the guy. You were right. Like your overriding point early on is spot on. That we've seen the limited options Michigan State has. He needs to be not only attacking but converting and getting the job done. So if his team's going to do anything, at least, and Rutgers is going to look to go at him defensively. So. No, I don't know. Who do you like in this game?
So, I do think Henry is a good matchup to guard Ron Harper Jr., right? Like you like that. Mm-hmm. I worry a lot about how Rutgers will kind of dictate the point of attack as far as ball handlers go. Jacob Young is going to see AJ Hoggard and be licking his chops to kind of disrupt Michigan State's whole offense by pressuring the ball, I would say. So I'm worried about that. I just have a really hard time trusting Rutgers with this free throw shooting, man. 60%. And Michigan State, also, you want to flip it, they have one of the worst free throw defenses in the Big Ten. So there is a bit of like, well, maybe this is time for a game where Rutgers kind of struggles. Michigan State kind of ends up having some regression positively toward teams not making every free throw against them. Mm-hmm. It's a huge spot for Michigan State. You look at the schedule. So you have Rutgers at home, Purdue at home, and like you got to have these two games, man, because then you're going to Iowa, you have Indiana, Illinois, Rutgers on the road, Ohio State on the road. This thing could get out of control real quick if you can't. These home games are kind of that stand that could. You win these two. All of a sudden, by the weekend, you're 500 in the Big Ten. Everything's okay. You lose one or both, and it's like, well, we've already lost 3 home games. It's the first week of January, and we're, 1-5? That would be a really tough spot. So I think you'll see an inspired effort from Michigan State. I do think that there's still some sort of impact of playing home and away in the Big Ten. Like you've seen that Minnesota's been terrible away from home. Michigan State almost beat Wisconsin at home. You can say whatever about that game, but that was competitive for a long time. And that was, so I think Michigan State puts out a fight, and I think they can win this one, but man, it's kind of that last stand in a way.
Yeah. Just because you're not going to make up ground in the league. Like, I don't know how many teams are putting together a 7-game winning streak. You know what I mean? Like, how many teams are going to be able to rip off 6 wins in 7 games and shit like that? That's just not really – it doesn't seem that plausible to go on big-time runs like that. The net rating came out this morning, and Michigan State's 119th. Now, it's crazy early and all that stuff, but, like – the numbers don't lie that much. Kentucky's 144th, right? And it's because it's playing that way. And Michigan State's 119th because it's playing that way. So
Michigan's 6th.
12 Big Ten teams are in the top 51. And Michigan State is 100 and what did I say? 15th or something like that? 19th. That's an issue. And Nebraska's 186. So that's the company that Michigan State's in, and it barely beat Nebraska the other night. So right now, Michigan State's much closer to Nebraska than it is to, or it's playing wise is much closer to the likes of Nebraska than it is even to Maryland or Ohio State or Minnesota or, whatever. So you're going to have to win some games here, boys. And this one isn't easy, but yeah, if you're 1-5 going into, who would they have after that? I had to look at
Iowa.
Schedule. If you're 1-5 going into a road
to Iowa City, that's you have to have. I think these are two. This could be.
Well, yeah, that's because that stretches Illinois. Iowa, Indiana, Illinois in a 3-game stretch after Rutgers and Purdue. I don't know.
I like Michigan State in this game. I think we're underrating home court advantage in the league right now. And I feel like Rutgers is just a little fragile. But then, personnel, I do think that Rutgers just overall toughness and athleticism.
I mean, Rutgers by all measures has been playing significantly better than Michigan State.
I know, but it's in the Breslin. The spot speaks to Michigan State for me. I'll be really curious to see if Aaron Henry can put together 2 games, because I still say that's the way out for Michigan State is figure out how to make Aaron Henry a dude and the rest will fall into place. But got to start. You have to play defense though, so that's where I look first, and then we'll see.
I like Rutgers here. So, and then I don't know where the conversation goes. So, but we'll see. It'd be one thing if against Nebraska, like I said, they saw some shots go down and stuff like that, but they still weren't making threes, and their defense still wasn't that good. So, really, what were the positives to take away from that game other than, some competent point guard play and Aaron Henry looking like Aaron Henry? And maybe it's a slow build, right? And this game you'll add one more thing, and then the next game you add one more thing, and suddenly you turn this thing around, right?
You can't get out of a hole.
It's not going to happen in one
right?
night. Sure. But I'd like to see some signs of 3-point shooting and defense being played that are at the caliber that can win games in this league right now before I'm taking them to beat Rutgers.
Yeah, to me, it's the defense. If Michigan State comes out and shuts down Rutgers, all of a sudden you got Purdue coming. Purdue's very anyone can shut down Purdue. They go away for long stretches, and then you're kind of back in a spot where okay, you're all right. And this is what Michigan State has done. Michigan State's had bad seasons, and they've made the NCAA tournament because of getting out of spots like this. So it'll be really curious to see where this team's at on Tuesday night.
Currently 13th in offense, 13th in defense in the Big Ten.
And that's not where you want to be at.
That's not where you want to be. Okay. You got anything else before we get out of here?
No, I think that's a wrap.
Okay. Very good. Well, we appreciate everyone listening. We hope that you are subscribed to The Athletic and to Hoops. Again, hope you had a happy new year, and make sure you tip those bartenders and servers, folks.